Hello and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐞𝐬. I'd like to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on 𝐜𝐨𝐧𝐪𝐮𝐞 TV. Please remember to download both the 𝐜𝐨𝐧𝐪𝐮𝐞 TV app on respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. 𝐜𝐨𝐽 TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So tonight I have a very special guest. Her name is Anastasia. She actually, we met through our kids. Our kids go to school together. They play soccer together. And I found out that she also is a family coach and a licensed therapist. And it was really great because it kind of brought that connection for us. And I really wanted to bring her in because to talk about, we call it Lights Out, a guide to bedtime triumphs with parents. And, you know, Anastasia, I work with many families as you do, and I think that you and I both can agree, like this is one of the areas that parents struggle with the most is that nighttime routine. How do we get our kids in bed without the fuss? Because I know as a parent of 6, you know, going back, like my oldest is almost 30, but even going back, I never want my kids to feel an angst before they're going to sleep. Like the last thing I want them to know is that mom's upset with them because they didn't follow the rules. They're not in bed. And that's how they're going off to dreamland. I want them to go to sleep with a peaceful heart and a peaceful mind. Mm-hmm. So I'm so glad to have you. I'm honored to have you on our show, talking to the entire world tonight about what are some of the things that you're running into and how are you specifically helping families right now with this?
Definitely. So one of the things that I hear, the same things that you are, it's just hard for people, especially when we have such a chaotic system right now, just with life, right? Everybody's super busy. There's so much going on. And then there isn't necessarily a routine that people get into, which then kids really struggle because kids need that consistency. They need that routine. And so that's what I'm finding a lot of times is trying to help people get into that like nighttime ritual that is hard, especially when you have sports or dance or all these other things happening. So trying to figure out how to make that work within your family.
Right. I mean, absolutely. And I know even now, what makes it even harder is that I think, especially with COVID, kids learned that connection comes through, you know, technology, like texting each other, messaging each other, roadblocks, whatever, you know. And so before, like when you and I were growing up, it was like, okay, it's time to go in. We say goodbye to our friends. We go through our night routine and we get ready for bed and we go to bed. Now I feel like the struggle is even harder because kids are having a hard time disconnecting with the socialization, getting off messaging, getting off, you know, roadblocks. It's time to say goodnight. Like I know for our house, we have boundaries, like 8:30, you're done. You're done. It's time to say goodbye. And, you know, looking at my kid's text, I can see she's like, oh, it's 8:30. My mom says I have to go. And that's just our routine because we need to settle the night down. Is that something that you help parents to do too, is kind of set boundaries? Like how are you helping the kids kind of break away from oh, you're the bad parent because my friends get to stay on, but I have to get off and I don't want to go to bed yet. I'm not tired.
Yeah, like the boundary thing is huge. And I think there's like a fine line. I talk a lot with parents about tone and how you're speaking with your children and the language that you're using, right? So like, for example, you can be aggressive and say something in an aggressive tone, or you can be assertive or you can be passive. And I think with boundaries with our kids, we really need to be using that middle ground of that assertive tone where you're setting that bound. And it's not just for the electronics, it's for everything through your day. And it starts when they're very little. And if people can start it when they're younger, it's much easier as they get to that middle child age when they do want to be on Roblox at 8:30 at night, because then it's really hard to disconnect from it because of the addictiveness to it. And so, yeah, we have the same thing here and with my son, and he wants to be on the electronics. So we have very strong boundaries. And that is something that I find parents struggle with a lot of times.
Yeah. So how are you specifically helping families to kind of work through this? Like, what are some of the magic tips that you're giving them that you're finding that's working?
Really coming up with a bedtime plan, coming up with a plan that's going to work. And so what I tell parents a lot of time is they need to do the plan with the child, right? So it needs to be something that everybody comes together and talks about. If it's something that's never been done before, you can't all of a sudden just throw it in, right? So having an idea of what you want, but then working with your child right, to come up with a plan that will work for everybody. And you have to define the problem. First of all, everybody has to understand there is a problem. And if not everybody's on the same page that there's a problem with it, there's going to be a disconnect. So you have to really define what the problem is and how it's affecting the child, how it's affecting the family, how it's affecting the other parent, if there is another parent in the picture. And so that's the first step, is defining what, if it is even a problem for everyone.
So once we define the problem, and
Mhm.
I totally agree with you, because I feel like we got to get to the cause. Like, is the
Yeah.
cause them breaking away from the social? Is the cause that, like my kids, they take some ADHD medicine. And I
Mhm.
can honestly say that even though the doctor's like, oh, if they're, coming off their medicine, give them a little bit more. I refuse to, because I don't want that to stop them
Mhm.
from getting a good night's sleep. So, but there are parents that do that, right? They have to give another dose in the afternoon. And so by the time 7, 8 o'clock come on, the kids are still with that medicine inside of their body. Sometimes the cause can be, eating too late. Like, if you're eating late, your kids aren't tired because the food's still digesting, their body's doing what it's supposed to do. So what other reasons are you seeing causes of kids having that issue with actually creating a good sleep routine to get to bed?
I mean, I think it's a lot of what you're saying, and it's kind of like the ambivalence of it, right? We're not forward thinking. So like you're talking about like the eating. So it needs to be a plan from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. If we know our children are struggling with getting in that bed and getting to that time. So it's something that you really have to sit down and think about with your spouse or your partner or individually, and journal out what you want your day to look like.
Oh, I
And
like
then from there, figuring it and then working very small. And then once you do that, you define the problem. I call it a family huddle, where everybody sits down and talks about what the plan's going to be. And then you set goals of what it's going to look like and how you're going to make that change in your family. Now, if they're older, it's hard, right? Because the kids are set in their routines and they don't necessarily want to change, because they like Roblox, they like the Xbox.
right.
They
Right.
don't wanna get out.
So hearing what you're saying, like one of the things that I
Mhm.
do specifically with the families that I work with is I help them to get their kids off electronics at least like an hour before
Yeah.
bed, right? So
Mhm.
like my kids are in bed by 9, but lights go out at 9:30. So they have an hour
Yes.
to get over whatever angst they have, because we quit the conversation in the middle of it and it couldn't wait till the next morning at school.
Right.
So we give them time to just wind down, because again, we don't want our last words with our kids to be, you're not listening, you're never in bed, you do this every night. We want it to be, you know, their gratitude, their blessing, the
Mhm.
snuggling them, the calmness, you
Mhm.
know. And so we have established that routine. And I think even with older kids, it becomes even more of a challenge.
Yeah.
The-
And so with older kids, it's interesting because that, like with the high school age, a lot of times their circadian rhythm is changing. And so just naturally, organically, they want to go to bed later. So it's learning to work with them and teaching them, like, okay, you're going to go to bed. They want to go to bed later, but then they have to get up so early. So really explaining that to them, teaching that to them, and then working in maybe a nap, and then guiding them through it. So their nap isn't 3 hours, it's maybe like 20 to 30 minutes, just to get that little break of a sleep. So they do want to stay up later. It is hard with teenagers because they want to, it's just organically what their body is doing. So it's hard.
Absolutely. And I have just been trained by Dr. Amen with as a brain trainer. And one of the things that I was reading is that adolescent years, not only is our frontal lobe not developed, and that's where that impulsivity comes into. And
Mhm.
that's why it's so important that us parents are staying on top of it, because we have to be their frontal lobe. We are that executive reasoning for them. We are the ones to say, hey, that's kind of impulsive. And let me tell you the reason why it's impulsive, and the urge that you have and why you have that urge. But also, it's that time where their brain is going through a big growth spurt. And
Yes.
so it's almost like their circadian rhythm is like opposite, right? It's like stay up late, sleep all day. Like if they could do that. And it's so funny because before I was knowledgeable about this, just recently, when I was raising my older boys, when they were teenagers, I would get so frustrated with them. I'm like, why is it so difficult for you guys to just sleep like normal people? Like, go to bed on time, get up, feel refreshed in the morning, not tired, and start your day. And they're like, I don't know, I'm just a night owl. And they just assume they're night owls. In all actuality, they're
Yeah.
not. It's just like you said, it's that organic, the way that all that it's like almost if a growth development, if you would. And
Hmm.
so, and now that my boys, they have to get up really early for work. I'll call them and they're like, Mom, I'm in bed. I'm like, what? You're in bed? I thought that was not I thought you were a night owl.
Yeah.
So, it definitely changes as we get older for sure. So, what else? Like, what else are you helping families to really overcome? Because I think that, some parents feel like no matter what they do, this is the worst part of their evening, the worst part of their day, that they've tried routines, it doesn't work. They've tried helping the kids understand. And it just always comes into a battle.
Yeah. And so that's what's really tough. And so some of the things I'm noticing with kids is maybe just getting away from the electronics piece, the anxiety of it. Some kids just get really scared at night. And so I talk about the brain a lot. And I know you just did that with Dr. Amen. And I love learning about the brain and teaching about the brain. And so when kids get into that like middle childhood part, their brains are changing and they become more aware. And sometimes when they get kids that have anxiety or even just light anxiety, nothing super severe, they'll lay down and they will all of a sudden think there's a monster in the closet or someone's going to break in the house or something's going to happen. That's completely illogical. It doesn't make sense, but their brain has automatically gone to that brainstem of that fight flight. And so I work with parents a lot on how to get them out of that fight flight and get them into a place in their brain that is more of their cognitive. So where they can think rationally. And that's tough when they get to that place. And so I work with them on a routine of getting where the parents then do a progressive leaving the room, basically. So I've done that with parents to help them with kids with anxiety.
So are you having parents not leave the room or you're having parents leave the room?
So they would, right? So you would come up with a plan. So this would all go back to that family huddle, like I was talking about before. And so the plan will be preset like days before. And so the child knows it's coming. They know what to expect. They've accepted it. Then what happens is you would do your whole routine that you've journaled out and planned. And then the night comes and they go to bed. And then automatically they're going to that fight flight. They're arguing with you. They're yelling. They're screaming, all of the things. And so then you begin the reflecting. I understand you're scared. I understand you think there's a monster in your closet. Like, I get it. It's really, really hard, but I'll be back in 10 minutes or I'll be back in 5 minutes, whatever agreement you've come on, you've agreed with your child. And then you could literally set an Alexa somewhere, you can set your watch, whatever you want to do. And then you just come back in 5 minutes and check on them and they'll see you. And then you'll say again, if they're awake still, I'll be back in 5 minutes. And some kids that have like not severe anxiety will fall asleep within that first 15 minutes. But others that have more of a severe, it's longer. It could take a longer time. And usually after the first few nights, you're not having to really do it anymore. Now, I do tell parents if you have a child that has severe anxiety, there probably needs to be more you look into besides just that program. So working with your doctor, your pediatrician, something like that. But that is something I've done a lot with parents and it works really well. We actually did it recently with our son because we had a fire alarm go off in our house. And for whatever reason, it really, really upset him. And so he's had a really hard time going to sleep and he wants us to stay in there. And it's like, come on, you can go to sleep. And so we've been doing this with him and it's working. So he'll want me to come check on him. And usually by the third time of me being very consistent, he's asleep.
I love that. And here's what I would add to this. So our listeners out there all over the world, it's make sure you're consistent with that because part of anxiety is your children not feeling safe.
Good.
So if you say, I'm coming back in 5 minutes,
yeah,
and even let them hear the alarm if you have to, because they need to know, like, even if they're falling asleep and they hear that alarm and it startles them for a second, they know you're coming back. That gives them that comfort to say, oh, I trust mom or I trust dad that they're going to come, either I'm sleeping or not, that they're going to come check on me. And that's really what kids need. They need the comfort of knowing that they're safe at night. I always used to think, like, why do we think the boogeyman comes at night? It's because we can't see the boogeyman. We can't see, there's no lights on to see what's happening. And that gives us a sense of not feeling safe. And so I love what you're saying. And And I say this because I can see myself, okay, I'll be back in 5 minutes, not setting an alarm, and then me getting busy.
Yeah.
And then them saying, well, mom, are you coming back? And like, oh my gosh, it's been 10 minutes. And for our kids that are old enough, they have clocks in their rooms. They can see that
Yep.
it's been more than 5 minutes. And now we're breaking their trust.
Yeah.
And so it's so important that, follow through and consistency. And I think that, you as a family coach as well, you could probably align with what I'm saying, is that one of the biggest issues I see with parenting today, especially talking to the kids I coach, is that there's no consistency in what their parents say.
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know and I'm a mom too, and I'm not saying that I'm always consistent, but that's one of my goals, is that I say what I mean and I mean what I say.
Mhm.
It's, you're not going to talk me out of it. A no is a no. And if I know that I could be persuaded, then I'm going to open the discussion. Like, it's just going to be an open discussion, like, okay, well, let's talk about it and let's come up together with the best solution right now.
Mhm.
Let's look at your behavior. Let's look at what you're doing and what that behavior is causing you. Is it taking you towards what you want or away from what you want? And so we have open discussions like that. And by having that, I build that trust with my kids, that they know that I'm not judging. They know that they can feel safe with me. And they know that when I say I'm going to come back in 5 minutes to check on you, I mean it. And, just like you, our fire alarm went off too. And it happened to be in our daughter's room. And she's already prone to loud noises. Like, since she was a baby, she covers her ears to this day. Like, if there's a fire drill at school, she has to cover her ears, right? It's always been a problem. So first of all, it startled the heck out of me and my husband,
Mhm.
and it was in her room that went off. So then it startled her, and it was like, oh, I don't know if I can go back to sleep now. And I'm like, well, Dad's already taken the fire alarm out of your room. Like, it's not going to go off again. We need to figure out why this happened. We don't know. And she's like, but what if there's a fire in my room and that and you can't see it? Like, now all these stories get created, right? So I wish I knew that strategy, because I probably would have. What we had her do is just sleep with us for a little bit,
Yeah.
and then we put her back in her room. But I love that idea. Is number one, have a family huddle. Let's get to the cause in this family huddle. Like, what's really stopping you from having sleep? And then number two, the follow through of what's the outcome of that family huddle. What do we journal down? What's the plan? And how are we going to implement it? I think also what's important is the ownership of
Mhm.
what all of our responsibility is.
Yeah.
It's, if you're supposed to be off an hour before bedtime, then you need to be off your stuff without giving me any grief about it.
Yeah. And we do that too. And so one of the things we do is, if we'll put in, it's a choice. Everything I do, and I talked with my parents about, is choices. And when a child's old enough, they understand that they have a choice. And so I'll teach parents that you can give them choices. Like, you have a choice. If you decide that you want to be on the electronics after I've told you not to, you've then made the decision that you're not going to get any electronics tomorrow. If you've made that choice, it's up to you if you decide to do that. And I find that really works well, because that's a big, kids love their electronics.
Yes,
and
they
and we are responsible for them, and we buy the electronics. They're not theirs entirely. And so we need to be very assertive and very consistent, and really have strong boundaries with them, because teach them the correct ways to be using it. And sleep hygiene, like you're talking about, is very important. So we're teaching them at a young age what's important and sleep is, and we're teaching them how it works in a healthy way. And so that's one of the important things I do with parents.
Yeah, I think, 100%. I agree with you. I talk about this all the time with families, is the power of choice. And if we can install at an early age, giving kids choices and understanding that the decision that they make always carries either a good consequence or a bad consequence. Like, you're
Mhm.
always going to get something from that choice that you make. And, you know, getting up late has consequences. Getting up early has great consequences. Like, you have more time and you're not rushed and you don't feel the stress and know the difference. So I love that. I love giving that ownership to that child about the choices that they're choosing to make in that moment, and the decisions that, the consequences that come with it. Um, and so for parents, like, when I say good consequences, bad consequences, people might say consequences and rewards. I
Mhm.
look at it as, it's the outcome that they are choosing
Mm-hmm.
in the end. Like, what's the end result for the choice that you're making at that time? So I really, really love that. And I think that, if we establish great patterns with our families, then, and I like what you called sleep hygiene. I love that. You're making it easier for you as a parent if you're consistent with the patterns. Like, here's your choices, here's what we want you to choose. That's why I do with my families, I do agreements.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell the parents, I'm like, let your child make the agreement. Let your child sit down and say, what is my responsibility? What do I earn from it? And if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, what are the consequences that come for it? And let them name their own consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can get your kids to have buy-in in it, they're going to follow it more. Versus, here's what I want you to do. I need you to sign it. And when you sign it, that means you agree to it. And the kid's like, but I don't agree with it. Well, then you're just not going to get your phone then. If you're not going to agree to this, you're not going to get your phone. It's like, well, I want my phone, so I'm going to sign it, and yet I'm not agreeing with it. So what are we teaching them? That you're forced to sign an agreement. Part of an agreement is that you agree, I agree, and we're coming to this mutually. And what I have noticed, that the agreements that me and my clients make, and then I give them to the parents, and I say, look, this is your opportunity to see what you agree with, and then have that family huddle to discuss it, to say what's going to work and because what you're doing is you're allowing your children to take ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And once they're able to do that, I think the whole sleep process actually becomes easier, if you would, and
Mm-hmm.
less of a struggle. So I'm curious, let's talk about younger ages. Like, I would be curious to know your opinion. I'm not a licensed therapist. I know you are, but I'm not. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. So I'm curious from you about sleep training. There's so much controversy about sleep training your baby. I've always been a firm believer that let my kid cry it out. I'll go in there. I'll check on them. I always let them know, like put my hand on them going, I hear you. I got you. You're okay. You're safe. Making sure their diapers changed, that they're not hungry, like all the basic needs are met. But letting them hear my voice, and then still walking away and letting them cry. I know there's been a lot of controversy with that,
Mm-hmm.
and how it builds people's self-esteem or self-worth as they get older. So I'm just curious, like, what do you suggest? What do you believe about it?
Well, I really think it's such an individual choice, right? So, like, for example, you're very comfortable and your energy is very comfortable with letting your child cry. You feel giving them that safety, they're safe. You're leaving the room with an energy that's calm. Now, if you have a parent that is completely stressed out about letting their kid cry it out, and they're in there and they're freaking out, like, oh, the doctor told me not to let you cry, and then they leave, the child's then there with that scared energy that you left in the room with them. And so really it's such an individual decision of how parents want to do it, right? I do think it could be controversial. And I think it's such, like, you have to know what you want your child. You have to make that decision for yourself. And we give so much to our children as babies that we don't even realize. It's not verbal. It's an energy that we hold with them, and they're taking it all in. And so I think it can be good either way, right? Like, so for me, I sort of did a mix. I breastfed for a really long time. It seemed to work. Our child was such an easy kid. We were really lucky in that. I feel like I can't even really talk about my baby because he was just so simple. But I was ready to be like, you're on your own. And I've always been that way with him anyway, just very independent. And so I could hold that space. I think it's about holding the space and being able to be really confident in whatever it is that you want to do. And if you are a parent that's struggling with it, like reaching out to other parents to see how they handle it, getting in some kind of group to talk about ways to make it right for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think like some parents feel that guilt, right? Because they do hear from their like, there's mixed things about with pediatricians. Some pediatricians like it's healthy to let them cry. They need to learn how to self-soothe. They need to, learn these. And then you have other pediatricians like, no, it stresses them out too much. And then they're going to have anxiety when they get older. They're not going to feel attached to you. So I think that number one, it really depends on your pediatrician and how much faith you're putting into what you're hearing. And I like what you're saying is find a support group that's not going to judge you, that is not this way's the only way.
Yeah.
I am kind of like you. Like when I have coached families that are becoming new moms, I worked in the field with babies birth to 3 for, gosh, 20 years. And, some of the things I said to mom is, what is your comfort level?
Yeah.
Because like you're saying is that your baby feels your energy, you
Mhm.
know, but a lot of times I find it's not the baby, it's the mom that that can't
Yeah.
let go. They're like, but it just cries. And I'm like, yeah, but when you're not with them, you're crying. So, what do you need? One way that I've also heard more recently, I didn't hear it a lot with the twins because the twins are 11. So I didn't hear it back when I had them. But now I hear more about sleep training in your bed.
Yeah.
And so I've had friends that have had babies that have died of SIDS and the babies
Mhm.
were in their bed. And I know, and I don't know now the research, maybe you do, that SIDS is still
Mhm.
undiagnosable. I don't know if that's still the
Yeah.
truth or not, because like I said, I've not been in the field for a while. But back when I would work with families and stuff, they still did not understand the prognosis. I mean, the diagnosis of how it happened, you know.
Right.
Um, but the two that I've had friends that have had children that have died of SIDS, they were in their bed with them,
Mhm.
you know. So for me as a parent, I that was never an option for me. I'm not saying that's the cause of it, but for sure that was not going to be if that was true, I didn't want that to
Yeah.
happen. So I chose not to. But I hear a lot now where people are promoting having the baby in the bed
Yeah.
and sleep training that way. And again, I'm not judging because I don't know. So I'm asking you out of curiosity, do you understand about this way of sleep training your baby? And is it okay? Is it healthy?
I mean, I think it could be both again. Like I've had parents I've worked with where they've done it and it's been perfectly fine. I've known parents that have slept with their kids in the bed for years. And I think it's like whatever works for the family. So a family is a system. And if everybody is cool with the baby and the kids in the bed and everybody's fine, then it's working for that family. But if they're not, and one person's stressed out, the other person's fine, whatever, the kids don't want to be in the bed, the parents want them there, there's a problem with the system. So, yeah, for me, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was scared that I could roll over on the baby. So I never did that. But I definitely know people that have done it and it's worked for them. And then I know people that haven't. So I think it's really whenever parents start talking to me about that kind of stuff, I really refer them back to their pediatrician,
Mhm.
for them to talk to them and do the research, talk about the research, talk about the safety and all of that. Cause I feel like they'll know that more than I would as the therapist.
Mhm.
And yeah, they'll know more about that than I would.
Yeah. So definitely, if you're hearing us, like, please check with your pediatrician. Like, we're not here to tell you what's right or wrong. It's definitely a personal choice. What your
Mhm.
beliefs are, and a lot of the beliefs come from our family. Like the reason why I got comfortable with the cry, because first of all, my first child, God bless you for having an easy child. My first child was not easy. He was colic for a year, and so all he wanted to do was cry all night long. And I was constantly, as a new mom, I was a young new mom. I was 20 when I had him. So I constantly was getting up with him and I was not getting any sleep. So it was affecting, and I like what you said, it was affecting the system.
Yes.
You know, my husband at the time was not getting sleep. So we were having issues and the baby was so demanding. And finally we were visiting my mom and she's like, why is he not sleeping through the night? Actually, it was my grandma. Why is he not sleeping through the night? I'm like, I mean, because he's a month old. He's not supposed to. Because all the books I read, what to expect when you're expecting and what to expect in the first year and everything else, it was like, it's normal for your baby to wake up at these times. So I thought it was all normal. But in our culture, that's not what they did. They let the baby cry it out. You
Mhm.
comforted them. They knew that there was still a connection, that you're there. And so a lot of the beliefs that I took on were from my family's beliefs. And I think that, when you're looking at the system of a family, where do our beliefs come from? And again,
Mhm.
our husbands have beliefs, we have beliefs, and it's coming together. Because what I hear you saying is, what's going to work for the system, your family system.
Yeah, it really is. And it's um talking about it, researching it, going to the doctor together, just really knowing what you want to do before you even have that baby. What is it going to look like? And another thing, in what you were talking about with like being sleep deprived, it's really important to ask for help and if you have friends, family, not just feeling like you have to do it on your own, because it is really hard when you have that baby initially, and making sure you ask for help. And I think a lot of us feel like we shouldn't. And it's really, really important to make sure you're asking and saying, hey, could you come over, maybe watch the baby so I could sleep for a couple hours if that baby does have colic and the baby is not sleeping. So I do talk to parents a lot about that, just reaching out for support and help and using the people around you as support. So especially if where we live, the military, a lot of people don't have their parents around here. And so using other families that are nearby to help out and work together.
I love that. And so for me, when I coach families that have young kids or even older kids, like, create your tribe.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like you said, you and I both live here in a very military town where there's a lot of transition going on, a lot of deployments going on. And, new mamas are moving here and they don't have that support yet. Um, we talk a lot about social media, and, as much as there's negative to social media, I feel like there could be positive too, because there's lots of groups that people can join now where they can go in. Like, I have my Facebook group called Redefine Parenting. And so there's, thousands of people there, so people can support each other and people could talk about things and just not feel judged. And there's great people that, are family coaches, or I have pediatricians on there that people can ask, and, people are able to get support they need. So it's really, again, finding your tribe, finding your support, and not feeling alone. If you're a part of a church, meet your parents at daycares. Like, there's all options. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing you say, the most important thing is, you don't have to feel like you're by yourself.
No, not at all. And I think talking about the social media too is the groups. Like, there's so many amazing Facebook groups out there now to use that parents can get involved in, or friendship, whatever it is that you're looking for, that can help and not make you feel like you're alone. And then just the research now, there's so much research out there. So really talking to your doctor and finding a doctor that you really are comfortable with, that you agree with their thoughts and their values, and really using them as a resource. People are so open now to helping and working with you.
For sure. So here's the $1,000,000 question that I get from a lot of my parents. How much sleep does my kid actually need?
That's good. And it depends, right? Between the developmental level that they're at. And so the research shows different for each level. So when they're babies, they need more, and then it lessens, and then the teens tend to need a lot of sleep. So the research, I don't have it. I have to look. I do know that actually, but yeah, it's research based. They'll tell you, it shows that there are a specific amount of hours. So like right now for like a 9 or 7 to 10, I think it's like 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours of sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the last research I saw too. I mean, lately I study what my kids' ages are, because again, we have our, discussion, as you call family huddle, to, they're in bigger grades. Like, my son is in 6th grade, my daughter's in 5th grade. And it's like, well, we're in a new grade. So does that mean we get more time? And I'm like, well, let's look. Let's look at the time that we get up in the morning, and let's look at the time that you go to bed, and how long does it take you to get to sleep? And generally my kids, it takes about 15 minutes and they're up. They're done. And so we really learn do we need to adjust it? Do we not need to adjust it? And it's interesting because my son always has the argument. But I get up so good in the morning. And I'm like, and I'm glad you do. And doesn't that feel good to get up good in the morning? And he's like, yes, so I could stay up late. I said, and how awake are you in the morning? He's like, well, it takes me a little bit. I said, yes, because you feel tired. But think about when you sleep in on the weekends and you get up in the morning. How good do you feel? Yes, you get up good on the weekends too, but how good did you feel? Check in with your body, you know? So what
Mhm.
I try to do is bring it back to my kids checking in with themselves.
Mhm.
And how do they want to feel? It and I try to tell them, I'm like, it's a blessing that you get up good in the morning, that I'm not constantly like, get out of bed, let's get dressed. Like, here's what you got to do. And again, like you, I really push my kids to be independent.
Yeah.
Your morning routine, what you need to do, what time we need to leave here to get you to school on time. And I need you to take ownership of what you need to do. So when they are able to do that, that's their idea of got up good. What I want them to learn is to learn how to check in with themselves physically.
So it's interesting you say that. So we've worked a
Mhm.
lot. I work with parents on that, and we do I do a lot of different meditations. We've been teaching kids to help them exactly with that. So doing body scans. So when it's time to go to bed, or you're starting just to relax, is just do a body scan and going through. And there's different scripts you can find online, or you can put one from an app, whatever you choose to do. And then just feeling each part of your body, starting with your head, really focusing, and then going to your face, and just doing that whole body scan of what your body's feeling like. And then if they're like, I'm still not tired, then you could sit. I've done the body scan with my child before. Like, we'll do it together. Now he'll do it on his own, because we've been doing it for years, but he'll be able to tell me my legs are really tired. And I'm like, yeah, they are really tired. You've been running like a lot today. So they really need to rest. They need that sleep. So that's a great way to check in with your body, is doing the body scans, to get in touch with each individual part.
Wow. I love that strategy. That is such a great strategy. I'm going to have to try that. That is so good. Because I do that, a body scan, when I'm working with people and we're checking in with their emotions. Like, where
Mhm.
you're feeling your emotion, like scan the body from head to toe. Where is this emotion showing up for you? And what does it feel like? What does it look like? What color is it? Is there a texture to it?
Mhm.
And so I do that with my
Yeah.
teenagers that I work with. So they really can get in touch with that emotion and where it physically is affecting their body. But I never thought about that, doing it with the younger kids and just checking in about where sleep is showing up, like what's tired in your body,
Mhm.
you know? I mean,
And they
because
love
if you ask me, I would say my brain is tired. Like,
it.
every night I'm scanning my body, and what comes up for me is my brain is tired.
Yeah.
It's been working overtime today. But that is I love that. I love that idea. I think another thing that shows up is that kids, again, because their frontal lobe's not developed, that
Mhm.
they have a harder time, especially our teenagers, like as we get into older age teenagers, having the struggle with not only comparing, right? Like, especially if they're, into their partner and their partner staying up and that's the time that they want to chat. And for us, like, we have boundaries. So, of course, my kids are younger, so there's not partners yet, but they're still friends.
Mhm.
And some of their friends are on social media. Some of their friends are allowed to stay up past 8:30 to talk. In our house, number one, my kids are too young for social media. My rules, my boundaries. It's a personal thing. So
Mhm.
there's no social media. But they do use Messenger on their computers. And, you know, it's a challenge because it's other parents have different boundaries and different rules.
Yeah.
And so, but what I'm noticing even beyond my kids' age, that they are starting to have partners. They are starting to have deeper friend connections. And it's a challenge because they literally don't feel tired, because the excitement that they have to have that connection outweighs
Yeah.
anything that's tired. So they don't even realize it. So what strategies are you giving families to help their kids to not have FOMO, fear of missing out,
Mhm.
of the conversation, and really being able to check in with their own self, and realizing that, you know what, yes, I'm excited, but yes, I'm tired, and I could be the best me if I get more sleep.
Right. And so I think when they're younger, it's easier, like you're saying. So starting as young as you can to have those boundaries and those things in place in your family. I think with the older ones, it is more challenging because they are seeing the other kids. So really, it's having that schedule in your home that is set. And working together as, again, I get into this whole system piece, is this is what our family looks like. And I know it's frustrating for you, but this is what we do in our house. You live here. These are the boundaries. These are the rules. This is the way it's been. And it's hard. Like, it's really tough. And so I really work with parents on using that assertive tone, not aggressive, just assertive, and then also talking and explaining. And I find that kids, when they understand why, right? And if you've been working with this child through, they're going to understand why they need to go to bed. And so hopefully that's going to outweigh that FOMO. You might have a child that really can't get past that. And so that's going to be another situation. You might have one child in your family that it works for and the other it doesn't. So really understanding why they have that FOMO. Why do they have that? What is missing intrinsically for them that they need to have that connection then whenever it's time to go to bed or not.
Yeah, I love how you bring that up, because I always look at like, what are the needs that they're trying to fulfill in that moment?
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of kids that I work with have low self-worth and self-esteem.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's the FOMO is actually, if I hang up, if I no longer have connection with them, will they like me tomorrow? Will I still have a friend in them? Will I be, left out? And, or they're going to see that I'm not worth it. They won't invite me.
Right.
No, I see a lot of that happening.
I do too. And I think it's the parent, again, us communicating with our kids and being with them. And I think it goes back to what you said like when we were talking about coming back in 5 minutes, coming back in 10 minutes, and sticking with what you say. I think it goes with communication. It's whenever you have that child in your home for however many years, right? And so your job during that time is really communicating and talking with them. And so that fear of missing out's happening. You need to learn why and understand why, and communicating like, yeah, that really sucks that they might not like you tomorrow. Like, how can we work on that? What can we do to make you feel better? Is that really a friend if they don't want to like you because you can't stay up late? So really having those conversations with your child, that's what we talk about with the parents I work with, is communicating with them and having the open, really conversations and connections with your child.
100%. And like you, again, that's why we align so much. We're talking about the same thing. It's like I teach my parents that to have that open, safe, and trusting space to communicate. And so, like I coach the kids and I coach the parents. I mean, mostly the kids, and then I bring the parents in because I need the parents to be able to transition into the person that their kids feel comfortable talking to without the judgment. And part of that is creating that open, safe, and trusting space. How do you get your kids to say, hey, I'm not okay? This is what's happening at school. This is what's happening to me. This is what I feel like because so-and-so had a birthday party and I wasn't invited, because let's just face it, you're not going to be invited to everything. That doesn't mean that they don't like you. It just means that they had a choice to make. And, I joke with my best friend. We've been best friends since we were 6 years old. So for 44 years, and I said, you know what I still remember? I remember that you didn't invite me to Magic Mountain on your birthday. And she's like, it wasn't my fault. My parents said I could not invite you. And I'm like, I know, but I'm still hurt. She goes, Vina, that was when we were 10. Like, this is 30 years ago. Like, we please get over this. And I'm like, no, we can't. She goes, but it wasn't my fault. And it goes to show you is that sometimes us parents have to make an executive decision. And maybe it's based off something that we think about the child, or, I know that I was a very hyper active kid. And so sometimes I was a little much. So sometimes the parents had to say, look, you already have these many kids coming. It's just having her with us would just be too much for us. So it wasn't something negative. It was just the parents trying to make that decision. And yet as a kid, I felt left out. And my mom wasn't there to, talk about it with me, to process it with me.
Yeah.
And so I carried that for so many years. And now we're both 50, so we joke about it. It's just fun to rile her up about it. But the point is that sometimes that still happens, right? And so if we have that communication with our kids, like you're talking about, it makes it easier for them to be able to come to us and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. Or, I feel left out.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that that processing and having that time with your child and talking with them about those things that are really hard. And with social media, it's into the home. It's not just at school the next day. So I think a lot of times with the parents I'm working with, the goals need to be, we work on goal setting and whatnot, is establishing that connection in those conversations. But what I find too sometimes is parents like us might not have had that back then. And so it's a new skill set for us. So I really work on just myself doing things different. Not that my parents did anything wrong. They knew what they did, the best they could do with what they knew. And so I don't blame them. I don't think anything bad, but I try to do things a little bit different just from what I've learned, or just see, or how it works different with my child than how it was with me. And letting parents know that it's not necessarily their fault if they didn't do it exactly right the first time.
I agree with you again, 100% is that, and even us, we're doing the best that we can with what we know, and that's why I know that I got into the field of coaching families, is because if we know better, we can do better.
Yeah.
And, I have experience because I do have the adult kids. I do have the younger kids. I do have the multiple kids. I have been just a working mom. I've been an at-home mom. Like, I have so much of the spectrum, so I can really appreciate where a lot of these families are coming from in that, the challenges that they feel in those moments. And even now, I think the biggest struggle that we have is learning to parent our kids in the world that we're living in now, and not parenting our kids with the way we grew up.
Yeah, it's so different.
Huge generational gap. I mean, back when I was growing up, it was okay to get spanked, and it was not considered child abuse. It was, you were rude to that adult, I'm going to teach you a lesson. And we were scared of our parents. We were scared of the spanking, so we knew to do better. We didn't know to do better because it was the right way to do it. We did better because we didn't want to get hurt. We don't want to get spanking.
Right.
And now, like, I don't spank my kids. I have 6 kids total. 4 of them were my natural kids, and I didn't spank them.
Right.
It's a different era. I learned, so I knew better, so I could do better, and helping them take ownership for their actions and what they do. And, just bringing that full circle, I think it comes back to what we were saying, is helping our kids have that choice about their sleeping patterns. But I think it's also important, especially as our kids get older, for them to understand the value of sleep. Because I'm going to tell you, I wish somebody was forcing me to take a nap every day again.
I know. Love a nap.
I would love that. I mean, I remember in kindergarten fighting it. Like, on the weekends, it's time to take it. I don't want to take a nap. Like, I want to go play. And now if somebody would force me to take a nap, I would love it. So it's like I tell people, sleep is part of our process, especially, like you were saying earlier, is like, don't get sleep deprived. Right. So if we could teach our kids good sleep habits now, healthy sleep habits now, how are we setting them up to win as an adult?
Right. And we're teaching them a system that'll work for them when they're older. And we're trying, and it goes back to just like, it's not just going to happen, or you're going to have to guide them through it. You have to model it. You have to show them what it looks like in a healthy way. So we're the models for our kids. We're the ones that are teaching them. And you have to be conscious of it. You have to be very conscious and cognitive. Use that frontal part of your brain where you're thinking about what you're doing, because they see all of it. They watch us. And they know. And if we're teaching them good sleep hygiene and good sleep habits, that'll carry with them, because it's just going to be normal for them, because that's the way they grew up.
Yes, I love it. Anastasia, it has been such a pleasure to have you here. The knowledge that you have brought to our listeners, I'm so grateful for you taking time to join us today and really bring forth your knowledge and your experience with the families that you coach, and really helping our listeners across the world to understand that, number one, it really starts with making sure that everything's working in your family system, right?
Yeah.
And totally. The second thing I heard you say is really about having the effective communication, with your kids. So thank you again so much. And like I always tell my viewers, remember to be curious and not critical. Be there to hear your kids, ask questions, and really allow them to know that you're there to support them, not to criticize them, and to work as that family unit. Thank you so much for all of us joining in. If you're finding value in the conversation here on our show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for even more tips and conversation. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, whatnot. My QR code for my book, Teach Your Kids That They're Enough, is listed here too. Please go and get the free ebook download. Thank you for joining the conversation tonight. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.